in school, the sheeple are taught to have a healthy outlet for your anger. And they'll advise them to do some randomly useless crap like yell into a pillow or hit a pillow or something along those lines that ensures that the powers that be and the system in general doesn't have to deal with the inconvenience of a cog in the machine having an issue, right? Doesn't have to be oiled. The squeaky joint doesn't have to be oiled, or I don't know, what do you do with a squeaky joint? Like whatever. But one of the things that I love to see is how people handle conflict and anger. And I think anger is a gift. But seeing specifically developers and how they handle it is always interesting because they can be really dangerous. And an example of that is a group of developers who built an entire Linux distribution for the sole purpose of telling California's age verification law to go to hell without lawyers or a lobbying budget whatsoever. And they put up a website declaring that they are, fully knowing and intentionally non-compliant. And they published the source code and started planning to mail $12 computers running the non-compliant operating system to places like elementary schools. Now, I don't personally really understand the whole elementary school thing, but I definitely appreciate anyone or any group that makes such a declaration, mainly because seeing developers cave and then, cite compliance as a justification is just really pathetic. And it's something that I'm sick of. And I personally name and shame some of the people on my blog that actually do this. And some people definitely disagree with this. They dislike that I call them compliance simps and point out in general how weak-willed they are, that they go along with this under no threat of duress or anything. They're just statists, really. And as individuals, I think that's a gross characteristic to have, basically. And at the end of the day, the people that don't like it get angry about it, and that's fine, right? Like, they're allowed to not like that I make an article about something like that. It's their prerogative to do so. But it doesn't invalidate anything that I said, right? So I have a very detailed video series coming out about the whole push for age verification, which is just really Orwellian doublespeak for ID verification, which is really Orwellian doublespeak for ID confiscation. And that's my position. Because no matter the lie that they try to shove down your throat, they will keep that ID on file. And eventually, they'll get hacked for doing so. And that data, your data, will be sold. And, let's pivot for a minute to another set of shills that we saw, which have always been shills, just how they are, is California's politicians. And they passed this AB 1043 law, and they lied to their voters. What a shock. It's just force of habit. It's like a leech needs to suck blood. It's just what they do, But they lied about everything, basically. It forces your operating system to demand that you tell it how old you are. And then when you do that, it snitches on you to, basically any application that asks. So basically, if you actually believe any politician at this point, it's debatable that you're part of the problem in general. Now, the thing that really aggravates me about stuff like this is it's your property. Like, you own the computer, you paid for it, and then the state decided, which is just it's a bunch of geriatric weirdos that all just vote together and say, because we vote together, we can tell you what to do. We look at things like, people like, oh, it's like Papers, Please, when they used to demand your ID when you're driving through the checkpoint. And I say it's nothing actually like that, if you understand the situation. Why? Because that was better, right? And it's like, whoa, what do you mean? Well, they gave you your papers back, right? Like, nowadays, they don't even do that. Like, the whole push, for this nonsense was bankrolled by Meta, in essence. Like, not really. There's a lot of tangential things that are connected to it, and a lot of people that are connected to it, which is kind of why, like, the rough overview that I've created is it has to be like a 26-part series on this, which is insane. Meta, essentially, if I had to like really distill it down, Meta spent at least $26 million lobbying in 2025 to move the blame for not verifying kids' ages off of social media and onto operating systems. And the corrupt politicians who voted for it accepted pre-written bills from a Meta-funded front group that's called Digital Childhood Alliance. And then they lied to their constituents' faces about why. Again, leech needs blood, right? So once the infrastructure actually exists to verify one thing about you before you're actually allowed to own your property, adding identity checks or behavioral scoring is just one update away. Because the mechanism is identical, and the only thing that actually changes is what they're checking. So in the future, I think if this is accepted, we're going to see more and more checks, more and more layers of that wall, more gathering information to put you inside of a wall, whether physical or digital. It's the same. It's a prison, irregardless. But Ageless Linux changed one of the files in the operating system to give itself a different name. Like under the law's own definition, essentially makes it a regulated entity. And then it responds to every age check with error, data not available. And there is no actual age data, and there never will be. They collected nothing, and they have nothing to actually hand over. And California's penalties, which is just robbery, it's essentially what it is, are calculated per affected child. And identifying someone as a child requires what? It requires an age signal, right? And that's what Ageless Linux refuses to actually generate. You can't calculate a fine for missing data using data that's missing, so the enforcement math essentially just deteriorates before anyone is even starting to do the checks. And they maintained a tracker at agelesslinux.org, which essentially documents which distributions are caving and which published tools exist to strip the age verification out of each one of them. Ubuntu, for example, adds an age prompt, and Ageless Linux publishes a tool to strip it out. Fedora ships an age verification service, and they publish a replacement that does nothing. And every single one of these OSs that bend over and willingly put this crap in tells you a lot about what they think about you, right? That's what it is. Up to this point, we heard a lot of virtue signaling about how, Linux is, it's for the user, it's for the user. Yeah, no, it's not. Not if you're like one of these weirdo developers anyway. But they also plan to ship a sub $15 board, which is what we were talking about earlier. It's a small computer. It's like the size of a credit card, essentially, that runs the full operating system, right? It's loaded with the non-compliant operating system and the explicit non-compliance notices, which is great, and hand them out to schools and libraries. Now, open defiance on cheap hardware given directly to the kids that the law claims to protect is pretty awesome. Basically, on top of that, they're building Ageless Store for Q3, which is an alternative app store that bypasses the age system entirely on any compatible Linux desktop. And they're distributing everything through BitTorrent, which under the law's broad definitions might make every person sharing the download an operating system provider. So there's that. It's a technical violation. But, if you load up Moldvat, it really doesn't matter. So the corrupt politicians, though, who wrote the law were so focused on doing what Meta paid them to do, that they got pimped out to do, that they didn't even think about what kind of sloppy definitions, existed inside of it. Now, the distro community is kind of split over this, and I think it's important that you know who's on what side. Now, Brian Lunduk has been maintaining a tracker of every major distribution and where they stand, and the picture kind of gets more obvious every week. We see how people go. So MidnightBSD, for example, is the only operating system that's actually built age verification into their base system so far. Of recording this video, that might change by the time it's actually published. I got a lot of crap going on, but it stores your birth date. It sorts users into groups based on age that control what software you're allowed to run and asks how old you are every time you create an account. They built this automated system that constantly reclassifies users as they age up, so the OS always knows exactly how old you are and what you should and shouldn't have access to according to them. Instead of just telling the state to go to hell, built the exact surveillance infrastructure the state wanted and then punished their own users by banning everyone in California and Brazil entirely, which is absolute insanity. Ubuntu, Pop OS, Elementary OS, and Fedora have all staged a plan to implement age verification as well. And these are some of the most popular desktop distributions in the world. And all of them are bending the knee. Now, every one of them is choosing to build surveillance infrastructure into their own operating systems to satisfy these corrupt politicians who took these, this pre-written legislation from Meta, basically a Meta lobbying group, right? Because they were too lazy or too stupid to write it themselves. Probably both. And, if you are running any of those four, you should really be thinking very seriously about what that means for your relationship with your operating system going forward. Now, I know a ton of people who say, like, who cares, Sam? It doesn't, it doesn't matter, or asks, like, what's the big deal in this age verification? Not like they're not requiring you to give up your ID, right? And, at the end of the day, that's true. Like, they're not, they're just asking. But I would point out that's how it starts, right? That's how it starts. Accepting it and normalizing it, and it makes it okay. And all this is just virtue signaling about nonsense. Like, all of these operating systems that are just blindly, allowing this are garbage, in my opinion. The ones that don't are pretty awesome. Those are the ones like the Artix Linux, for one. That's the one I'm switching up to. I got a ton of stuff I had to actually move out before I do that, but that's the one I'm thinking. I'm seriously considering going with. If you like a different one, I'd love to hear about it. I know Void Linux was also a serious contender, but you like Artix better. Anyway, side issue. Essentially, the state never really seeks to actively dissolve its own power. So, by this being implemented, it's not something that's going away, right? It's actually the opposite. It's going to get worse, and the more people comply, the worse it'll get, the sooner it'll get, right? So on the other side, 15 distributions, to their credit, and operating systems have explicitly refused, which is a great reason to consider them. Artix Linux, like I said, really stated it plainly when they said, we will never require any verification or identification from a user. And I absolutely loved seeing this. And, the fact that they've added Ex Libre is why I will convert from my current distro. Like, there's a bunch of others, Slackware and Void Linux and EndeavorOS, right? Zoran, like, there's a whole, there's a wide range of them, including GrapheneOS. Like, that definitely, they get an honorable mention. It's hands down the best OS for a phone that you're going to find. There's, people like, what about E? It's totally run by, the French feds, but whatever, that's just a side issue. We'll get into that some other time. Even Free DOS said no, right? Arch Linux 32 went further to outright ban users in California and Brazil rather than comply. And inside System D, which is the core system manager that most Linux distributions run on, someone submitted a change to remove the birth tracking that, got added back in March. And the main maintainer, who's Lennart, who actually runs systemd, shut it down himself, and a developer named Jeremy ended up creating a separate version of systemd specifically to strip it out. And that split is going to really matter in the future because systemd touches almost everything in the modern Linux that the birth date field gives the age verification system a place to store its data at. And that's like the deepest level of the operating system, right? It's PID 1. So, but every distribution that builds age verification into their system is layering the first layer of a digital permission system. And that will go far beyond age. It's just like, that's just how it works. And the people that are, running these projects should know exactly how their users feel about it. So you should let them know. Like, I personally have absolutely no issue showing the kind of degenerates who promote it, talking about them on my blog, because it's that kind of bootlicker who plays the fool that's the real danger in the long run. The state takes it to the most extreme level because the state has a monopoly on violence. That's what they do. It's what it is. Most businesses make money by buying and selling and trading goods. The state makes money with the threat of violence, with the bayonet, basically. So, anyways, the project's bet is that enforcement will land on Apple and Google rather than a protest distribution giving away free software on the internet. And that bet's probably right. So if you're running one of these distributions that's planning to comply, now is the time to think about actually switching. Use a distro that gives you actual ownership and actually respects you. And more importantly, you can learn a lot about someone when things like this actually pop off, right? You can learn who's willing to bootlick and who thinks that it's a virtue to begin with. Never mind getting the opportunity to actually learn things like the opposite. So the Ageless Linux tracker is at agelesslinux.org. Documents of who complies and who resists, and Lundijk's, tracker pretty much does the same. Honestly, bookmark them both and give a star on GitHub, if nothing else. If your current distro folds, the Ageless Linux removal tool will strip out whatever gets added to it. But at a certain point, you really have to ask yourself why you're even running a distro that would force you into something like this to begin with, that would force you to comply with some nonsense like this. And what happens when they force something else? Well, they tell them, hey, you're going to put in this back door and you're not going to say anything. If you know those people already comply, can you guess what they're going to do? So that's the reality of where we're at here. It's not a good place. But the good thing is there are alternatives, and that's massive to begin with. So stay safe, stay aware. There are adversaries out there. Thanks for watching to the end as always, guys, and I'll see you in the next video.